Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and today I'm going to be painting and drawing and showing you some easy techniques of how you can create a tulip and a little pretty bunch of lilacs. I'm going to break the drawing steps down and make it easy, and then I'm going to show you a fun creative way to do loose brush strokes, dash and splash a little bit of watercolor, add a few little scribble bits at the end, and come up with something very pretty. Today I'm a part of a YouTube collaboration. It's the first of the month collaboration, and it's all about spring flowers today. We have two hosts today. We have Brenda with Rustic and Lace DIY and Krista with Krista's Crafty Life. You're also going to find a playlist with all the other videos that everyone else has contributed for today's collaboration. You're going to find all the links for all that stuff down inside of the description box. Well, let's get started. I can't wait to show you this easy way to create this tulip and pretty little bunch of lilacs. Let's go ahead and start with the drawing process, and I'm going to start with the tulip, and I'm going to show you just a basic shape for a tulip. I'm going to start at the bottom and make the base of my flower in a smile face shape, and then I'm going to be starting with one full petal. I'm going to be a little bit narrower at the bottom, come out on the edges, and come to that pointed little top at the top for my tulip. And then as I go to the left and the right, my petals are only going to be a half a petal. That way it's going to create that idea that my tulip is going around and that the petals are moving to the back of the flower, because you're only going to see part of them. So are you noticing how they're looking like they're over top of each other? And then for the very back ones, I'm going to be making two little hills that come up and down, and that's going to make those petals look like they're in the back. Tulips have a little bit thicker stem, so I'm going to start with that thicker stem part on the bottom, and then I'm going to double my line as I go down. I always like drawing stems at an angle. It just adds a lot more character to my drawings. Now tulips have those long curly leaves, and you can create them either just a simple little curl long like I'm doing here, or you can add a third line and make it look like it's flipping over on itself. Either which way looks good. I'm also going to be adding some script writing to this. I often think of script writing, especially this style, as being more like a drawing skill. The more you practice it, the better you're going to get. But this also has very much a whimsical style to it, where they're not all the same. You go down below the middle line, up above, have a little bit of bounce in your letters, and I love this style of script writing. Now I know drawing isn't everybody's thing, and if you'd rather just paint and skip the drawing part, go ahead and check out the link inside of the description box for my sketchbook membership. That's where I have all the tracers for any of the paintings and drawings that I do on my channel. It's easy to join and very reasonably priced, and I so appreciate those who've become members and support my channel that way. I like using this lettering style not only in my paintings, but it works great when I'm doing cards as well. Now let's go ahead and draw those clusters of flowers. They're in the shape of cones. I'm not going to draw exactly the little petals and everything, because that's not the style of watercolor I'm going to end up with. I'm doing very much a loose process of broad brush strokes, splishing and splashing. So here all I'm doing is drawing like little popcorn shapes, where there's some bigger at the bottom and then they're getting smaller as they go towards the top. Lilacs can have bigger leaves that have a point on one side, a belly in the middle, and then come to a point again when they touch the stem. And that's how I'm drawing the little cluster of the ones at the top. Again, I like to go ahead and bend my leaves just a little bit. It gives it a lot more character. In the end, I really don't necessarily have a lot of structure in this very much loose style, but if you would like to paint yours more structured, you can have more exact leaves and more exact petals. But I'm going to be showing you a loose style of watercolor to do mine on. Now I use this paper, the Canson brand. It's 140 pound. It's still considered a student grade, but it works really great. And I'm using the Paul Rubens watercolor. I always tell the students who follow along with me is that spend a little bit more money on your paper and then just buy the watercolor you can afford. And you really don't even necessarily need watercolor brushes. And actually today I forgot my watercolor brushes at home, and I was doing this painting on my work break, so all I had available was a Crayola crayon watercolor brush, that big purple one. That's what I mostly used. And then there was a couple cheap and expensive brushes. So don't let it stop you if you don't have the right tools, whatever they might be, to go ahead and do watercolor. Just use what you have and practice how watercolor works on your paper and how the water affects the color of your paint. And here I'm showing you the beginning of that loose process. You can see I'm basically just tapping in color. I first put clear water on, and then I tapped my wet color, it's pretty wet, and I tapped that color on the top. Watercolor always dries lighter, so what it looks like now when it's wet isn't going to look that way when it dries. So I'm going to be putting in a couple layers. Here I'm blending my colors, 2 colors of green at the same time, and it's going to work a little bit of watercolor magic. Watercolor will create these beautiful blends on its own just by letting the colors mix in that wet surface. You're noticing there I tapped a little bit into the red when I went up with my green. Watercolor always wants to flow wherever the paper's wet. So that red was wet, it's going to travel down into my green, and I love that look. Here I'm just doing a little bit of extra splish and splash, loaded up my brush with some watercolor, tap, 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 and create those beautiful little marks. You can see where that red kind of bled into my green, but I'm okay with that. And you're noticing I tipped my paper up, the watercolor kind of bled down. It's not going to go past anywhere where my paper is dry. So it's going to stay in that wet area and not travel out past that area. Watercolor is really interesting that way. If you don't want splitter splatters everywhere, do cover your surface. But it does wipe up pretty easily. It's not like acrylic paint, that's for sure. Here I'm going to put that water in those cone shapes for my lilacs, and I'm starting with this beautiful shade of purple, and then I had some blue off to the side, and then I mixed a little bit of purple in with that color because I want a light lilac and a little bit darker, kind of a traditional color lilac. And now I'm basically going to do the same thing. I'm just tapping my color inside of that water. Leave some open areas when you're doing this. Because with watercolor, you can't get your whites or your light colors back. That's why we start with the light ones first, because we can't bring them back after we have the dark on the top. So here I am splashing in the color, and now I'm going to pick up some highly more pigmented of that color, and I'm going to be tapping it in that cone shape again. First my dark one, and then I'm going to put in a little bit more of that lighter blue color. And then I'm going to go in with even a little bit darker color yet. But you can see it's not a lot of fussy brushwork. It's just very loose, tapping, gentle motions. And here I'm adding what it looks like with polka dots. Because my paper is wet, that color is going to blend out just a little bit, but I'm going to take my paper towel here and I'm going to dab it up. And what that's going to do is leave some very dark areas, but I'm picking it up so that pigment isn't going everywhere and creating just one very dark flower. I'm adding more. By doing it this way, I can create a pretty little variegated look where the color is dark and light. But I'm still going to have some of that intense color. You're going to be surprised at how much these really do lighten when they dry, when I come back to show you that next step. Now to do the greens, I'm just brushing them in, very similar to what I did with my tulip leaves. I'm just using that big old Crayola crayon brush pretty much the whole entire time. I didn't really use the little ones. I was able to use the big one. Often I tell the students, my students, is use a brush that might feel uncomfortable, that it's really too big. You might think to get more loose brush strokes is use a bigger brush. When we have those little tiny small brushes, we tend to do small little strokes and not loosen that up. So if you're interested in creating loose paintings, I really highly recommend use a big paintbrush. There I'm using a small one. I put the little stem in with that. And I'm going to go ahead and do some splashing. I'm picking up the purple and I'm picking up a little bit of the blues. And I can't remember if I did any of the green or not. Because my background is dry, there isn't any water there, most of my spots will just stay right where they are. Now, if my background was wet, when those spots got there, they would spread way out. But because it's dry, they're going to mostly stay put. So you can see that my pictures did really lighten a lot while they're dry. So now I'm going to come in and add a little bit more color, and I'm going to kind of add a little bit more structure by adding more color to my painting. So I'm picking up some of the red again that I had used before, and then I'm going to pick up a little bit of orange as well to add to this flower. Now I'm not wanting to cover up everything I originally put on because that's my lightest color. This is like more of my medium color, and I do believe I do come back onto this one after it's dried and I add even one more layer of the dark. The reds they're beautiful, but they can fade quite a bit, so you might have to add at least 3 layers onto your flowers. I do redo some of the greens as well because they've also faded, and you really do need that contrast in your colors. So if everything is too light, it's all going to look the same. Speaking of all looking the same, look at how much these purples really did fade. So I need to go back in and darken that area up. So I'm going to add some of that straight purple color back in, and I'm going to mix some up more of that blue color that I added originally and add some of that in there. I need to make sure I have some dark on the top. The lightest underneath is going to be my bright colors, but I do need to re-emphasize the dark. And I come back in with some greens as well and re-stroke over those too. But I'm still keeping my stroke work very loose and just brushing it in randomly. And I'm still using that really big round brush. And this is what my tulip looks like after it's dried again. So now I'm going to come in with my smaller brush and I'm going to pick up a little bit of orange and a little bit more of that same red color that I had originally used. This time I'm using that smaller brush and kind of concentrating more at the base of my flower and at the edges. I want to make sure I still have some light brightness on there, leaving some highlights and not everything the same. So by using my smaller brush, I can kind of carve around that area and make sure that the edges of my flowers are getting darker, but the centers stay bright and light for highlights. I went ahead and I tapped a little bit of the orange color in there too, since I hadn't done that before. I'm going to give these flowers another chance to dry, and then we're going to move on to the part that's the next layer. I'm going to use some ink work and some pencil work and a little bit of scribbling to bring these all to life. Some of my favorite mark making tools are the China marker in white. Love that pencil. I like using the uni ball in the white ink. The micron pens, and the 01 is the size I use the most, and then a Kimberly 9XXB pencil. Those are some of my go-to mark making tools. For the lettering this time, I decided I would use my Kimberly pencil to try doing this lettering with that. It was a little bit like using charcoal. This pencil has a super soft lead and a beautiful dark pencil line, so I thought I would try using it. I wanted a real vintagey feel to this painting when I finished, so I wanted to be able to have a little bit of sponginess quality to it. So that's why I chose to use this Kimberly 9XXB pencil. To help me create a very loose feel for the petal work, I used my pencil and I created a scumbling look. I'm pushing and twisting my pencil as I go down. Basically, I try to keep my pencil down on the paper and twist and pull as I'm going down. And that's going to create a petal feel without being actual individual type of petals. It's a great way to create a very loose feeling. I wanted to say a special thank you to Brenda and Krista for hosting today's collaboration. Make sure you check out their channels as well as click that playlist. I'm sure you're going to find some very pretty ideas using spring flowers in this collaboration. Now for the leaves, I'm going to be doing a very loose leaf work as well. I'm going to make sure I hold my pencil farther back, and often I'm pushing my pencil and not necessarily pulling towards myself. I don't want as much control. I want it to be a loose feel to it. So if I hold that pencil at the end and then I push it instead of pulling it towards me, it's really going to loosen up my line work a lot. I can even go in and just draw regular leaves, even where I don't have the green watercolor. I love that look of that loose feel for my leaf work. And here I'm using my Sharpie White. Sharpie Whites are very much like a soft color crayon look. It's very waxy. You need to use it before you were to put any pen work on the top. Pen does not like the wax. So if you're going to use the wax Sharpie marker type of pencil, you want to use that before you were to use a pen work, like the micron pen like I'm using now. Micron pens are permanent ink once they're dry, and you can also add watercolor over the top of them. So it's one of my go-to pens when I'm doing watercolor work. I'm going to take my finger just a little bit and I'm going to smudge it just a tiny bit, add a little bit of that charcoal feel around here and there. I wanted that vintage look, so I wanted to carry some of that charcoal to the edge and not make those perfect lines. So I'm adding a little bit of smudging over the top of it. Then once I got it smudged, I took my white ink pen and I'm blending it and it's kind of making a scratch pattern over the top of my lettering. And then I did some of that scratchy look as well inside of the flowers. I really liked how it looked and I liked the way it turned out, and I'll do it again for a nice vintage look feel for lettering and for the inside of the highlights of my flowers. When I'm doing the inside of the flowers, I'm also just creating those very much that scumbly look, so I'm not wanting to do exact individual petals, but continue on with here and there with a little bit of that scribbling type of pattern. I always save white to the last because I look at it as being kind of a sparkle or a glitter. Too much white is going to be overpowering, but just a little bit kind of adds a sparkle to your paintings. Now, once this was all finished, I would definitely need to clear coat it because a lot of these elements are not permanent, so I'd want to go ahead and spray it with a layer of clear coat. Now this one, I'm going to be doing some sketching on this one as well, but I'm using the Micron pen is what I'm going to be choosing to do this. That little nib is a 01, so it's a nice small little nib, and I'm going back and forth, stopping and starting, and I'm not trying to do perfect. I'm just coming in and going actually past my petals, doing multiple lines. But when I go inside of the petals, I try to keep the line work in the direction of way that the flower might be growing. So I try to keep the lines kind of curving out and give it a nice free-form look. When I get to my leaves, I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be going very loose, going past where I did the watercolor and adding a lot of different line work. And then for my lettering, I'm just going to be doing it with the Micron pen, and I'm going to be doubling up on any line that goes down. That's just going to add that little bit more of a script look to my lettering. So any line that is drawn down, you add another bit of line work to that, and that's just going to help it create even a little bit more of a script look to these letters. I decided in the end, just as a final bit of brightness to my tulip, I went ahead and I took a metallic marker in gold and added a few little gold dots. There's something about the gold and the red that looks so pretty together, and I thought it finished off this picture nicely. Well, let's take a close-up of what they look like all finished. If you like doing art and crafts, come on over to my channel. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. If you're already subscribed to my channel, make sure you click that bell so you get a notification of any new videos I might put up. If you enjoyed watching these flowers be created, here's a couple more videos you might want to check out. Leave me a thumbs up, leave me a comment if you might try doing these loose flowers for your spring paintings. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again. And next time, you'll create right along with me.